Welcome to the Struggle Bubble. I'm Chad Cutting.
I'm Craig Sergi.
Excited about today's episode, Craig. We have our first live guest. Robert Hatta is going to join us later on in the episode. And today we're going to focus a bit about burnout. We've talked about the struggle, the guilt, the feelings that are associated with us working so hard. We only have one speed. We're going to go as fast as we can. But before I go any further, Craig, and if you aren't watching the video, please, find it on YouTube. Craig is wearing bright pink headphones. Does Scarlett know that you took her headphones?
No, Scarlett's, they're mine. Keep it real.
I think you need like Princess Glitter Sparkle stickers all over it. Is there any glitter that comes with those headphones?
I don't know. What's the side looks like? Pretty legit.
Pretty legit. It goes great with your Santa Cruz boards back there.
Yeah, which ones we got? Yeah, dude. Keeping it real. We California. We
Yeah.
Calis.
Well, shout out to everybody that's liked and subscribed. We're getting some great commentary on our Instagram as well as through our podcast platforms. Interesting, Craig, of the viewership numbers as we reviewed this past week and where we're getting our
Global,
viewers
baby.
from.
It's global.
Yeah. Did you see the international exposure we have?
Singapore sling. We got somebody in Singapore, so whoever that is, leave a little comment on Instagram or wherever. Because I was kind of blown away that we've got Europe, Asia, US, obviously. I think we need what? Australia? We need somebody.
Oh, I didn't know it was going to be a geography lesson. Let's have you think this through. So you went to
Yeah.
two continents and then one country. So you're doing great so far.
Well, Australia is a continent, but that's okay.
Well, the United States is not a continent.
Well, we need. What do we need?
South
We need
America.
Africa. Yeah, South America
South
and
America,
Africa.
Africa.
Be cool if
And
we
if
got
there's
somebody.
anybody in Antarctica on an expedition,
That's where I was going.
hit
I
us
was
up.
going North and South Pole next. That'd be
Santa
cool.
Claus, if you are listening, please drop us a note, a like, and a follow. Share on Instagram. It's great seeing all the exposure. So we have it locally. We have Los Gatos, San Francisco. We've got my hometown. We had in Lorain, Ohio, and Akron, Ohio. A few Ohio's lighting up.
Chad,
Walk
try
me
and
through the
pronounce
pronunciations. Hey,
yeah, there you go. There you
that's
go.
why we're on the
Try and
same
pronounce it.
wavelength.
Yeah.
All right, so Loughborough,
Loughborough.
like 99 Luff balloons.
Yeah, it's an F. It's a GH that's an F.
How do you say H?
H.
H, like O-H-I-O.
Like herb. There's a H in front of the E on herb.
You've got Loughborough, okay. Then you've got Leicester.
No,
Leicester?
Leicester.
Damn it.
Yeah, you pronounce it Lester.
Like Uncle Fester.
Like,
It's Uncle
like
Lester.
Leicester Square, where Phil's coffee is.
Okay. There was another one in there that I could not pronounce to save my life, but
Leicestershire?
no, there's Leicestershire. There was another one in there with an S.
Oh, there's a lot of shit places in England. Um, no, it's pretty impressive though. So appreciate everybody that's subscribed and starting to follow us. We're starting to get a bit more traction on the old social media and Insta spam, which is great. We're going to start dropping these into LinkedIn as well, especially with today's guest. Pretty impressive background. I mean, Ohio to middle of Silicon Valley, and he's very humble, but to get the right GPAs and be an athlete to go to Stanford is no easy path for sure. There's a lot of people globally trying to get to these schools, and from a sports side and a academic side. So yeah, Robert did a solid job.
He's a great job, and just the power of connection of community. I reached out to him in 2018 when I was going through a little bit of the burnout that we're about to talk to, because I saw a VentureBeat article where he was talking about, what they're building in the Midwest and what Drive Capital and the partners that came from Sequoia are building out there, because there are talented individuals, there's great colleges, there's a huge ecosystem that can be built. And he brought attention to it. And meanwhile, I was going in, the reverse, going from Ohio, and didn't feel like there were enough opportunities for me to pursue. and it felt, you know, I wrote an article in college of, are we forced to leave? There's not enough opportunities. We're talking about making interesting investments in the state at the time, and a bunch of folks leaving after college. I went out to California, same as Robert, and it was great to hear his story of how he got back to the
Yeah.
Midwest, and you know, really made it work after he had, you know, had the drive to move out, to learn, to make connections, and really start building that company and building a life back in the Midwest.
Yeah.
So let's go into that a little bit right now. We're talking about burnout. You and I have left, I think, a combined 12 jobs in the past 15 years, maybe more.
Yeah. Yeah. Something around there.
And each one of those comes with different calculus. We talk in the interview with Robert a little later about, you know, what motivates you coming out of college or even getting into college. You and I think, had the same experience where we go back and say, well, I went to college because, you know, my mom made it very clear you're going to college. That was a conversation I remember, one of the earliest things of, you don't have a choice, you're going. You're going to go, so you have all the opportunities ahead of you. The problem for me is when I went into college, I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. Ask an 18-year-old, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Like, I don't know. I just want to hang out with friends. I want to live my life. I don't want to need to specialize. And personally, I struggled to find a major that really resonated with me. I went from economics. I tried to get into computer science, and maybe some of the worst advice that I ever got in 2002 was from my college football coach that said, "Don't do computer science.
Well,
That's
let
too
me pause you
difficult."
there. Let me pause you there. You asked the football coach if you should do computer science.
I
You
didn't
probably
ask the football
started.
coach. No, let's be
You
very
probably
clear.
started in the wrong direction.
When you go in, you don't declare right away, but you talk about what you're interested, the class load that you're going to take as a freshman, so that they know what they're dealing with football practices. And I said, I
But
want to go and have
let me
computer
pause you
science.
again. Let me pause you again. Sorry, you went to play football.
Yes, and not soccer football, actual
Got
American
it.
football.
Got it. Got it. Got it. I think
And
you did tell
baseball,
me that.
Craig, if you want to get into
No, no, no. I understand the
the
baseball
athletic
at 5 foot
prowess.
seven. I don't understand the football at five
Jesus.
foot seven. That's where I was going.
Well, you haven't given an S bomb yet today, so I'm keeping track, but you have insulted me. So if this is payback for the damn pink headphones, I get it. But yes, I'm very
Nah.
proud of at 5'7" and barely 5'7" at that. I played 4 years of college football, 4 years of college baseball. I'm not a pro soccer player like you were for, however
No.
many months that you were able to do
No.
that.
Yeah. No. 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 My. Going back to my. Yeah. I'm school of life, right? To your point about the jobs and etc. It was always Well, obviously the transition to California, right? It was the big one there, but it's that you don't know. And my thing was, 18, 19, whatever the age, it's a lot for, and we're going through this now with the kids. We see it right as being parents now. We've got 7 years left until our eldest start making those, well, less than that, 5 to 6
Yeah.
years, they start making some kind of decision. And depending on their skill sets, right, be that education, be that athletic, of where they may look to go. And, I think Robert hits it on the head if people listen to the interview of college isn't right for everyone. And I think it's more abundant now of you don't need to go and get a degree in something random to go and get a career in something you want to do. Right. If you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, there's obviously certain paths like that. But if, for example, take my kids, right? Maybe they want to become choreographers. I have no idea if there's something in universities or colleges that relates around dance and choreography, or is it better for them to go down to Hollywood and try and get on something that, who knows, right? But the point being
Yeah.
is there's multiple ways now to skin that cat to get to the goals that you want at 18, right? And I think Robert hits it on the head in the interview as well, that what we're all aspiring to from 18 to 30 is then different from 30 to 40, etc. As your life change, you potentially get married, have kids, family, whatever. He hits it really on the head, and there's one section in there that we didn't dive deep into, but the 1 year that took out of traveling, that will add the link to his Medium um, blog posts about taking that hard stop, 1 year out, kids out of school, we're traveling around the world, we're going to experience all these different things. And, you know, I'd love to interview Robert again in a few years' time and see what effect that had on his
Yeah.
kids as they transition into those college years of taking that year out and getting that experience.
That's the biggest part of what we've been talking about over the past, couple of months here on the podcast is what motivates us. We want to maximize life. You're trying to be the best, employee or business person. You're trying to be the best husband. You're trying to be the best father. You're trying to be the best coach. It comes down to being that having that flexible and openness, but understanding what you want. And I think looking backwards in time, we want to be able to provide our kids that flexibility. You mentioned it with the girls dancing. If they have the flexibility, they're not going to get trapped in a job. They're going to know what's important to them and they're going to move forward with that as the foundation and know that you and their family are there to support them every step of the way. And we have that level of support, but I think the driving factors in our minds were I need to get a job because that shows success. I need to keep up with the Joneses to show that I can get a job too. I can have the highest paying job. I'm going to, be the best. And that's where you were as a human. Your value was directly correlated with the job that you had, how much money you were making, the car that you're driving. And I think coming out of the 80s and the 90s, you have, the Gordon Gekko-esque, greed is good. And you see all of these, boiler room type movies that everyone wanted to be a salesman. You go in, you make that high commission, you make that high dollar. And what we talk about with Robert and you and I have talked about in the past couple episodes is your perception changes as you reach each tier or plateau. And I think for us, the first couple of job moves were about access and forward movement, climbing the ladder. I left, jobs in sports because they weren't paying enough. I wanted, the next big thing. And I go to into technology and into Facebook where you're making a great salary, you're on a rocket ship, and then the next path is, well, let's leave this job because I'm not getting management opportunities. I want to be able to manage people because that's what I think progression looks like. And then it starts to flip a little bit of like, all right, I got the manager role. I'm making really good money, but I'm having trouble waking up in the morning and getting motivated to get out of bed. I'm not able to go to, a little league game, practice, a recital because I need to. I feel like I need to build these decks or do this homework, do this prep, and it just starts to change their
It's
perspective a
all the
little bit.
bullshit, dude. It's all the bullshit. People are doing 16, 18-hour days. You're falling asleep in bed with your laptop on your knees. And it's that ladder system, to your point. You try to get mid management, well, that means I get more stock. That means I can retire earlier. All that bullshit you get absorbed into, honestly, is it's hard. It's really, really hard. And it's hard to extract yourself. It's hard to take a pause. It's hard to, and Robert talks about it as the prioritization of life, right? Sitting down with your significant, or his style was sit down, prioritize, literally whiteboard it. If it's not written down, it's not real. And then start working out where the lines either get blurry or you need to fix things. And in his story, it was okay, I'm done with job, I'm done with all of this. And again, we're taking that 1 year out. And again, be great to speak to him in a few years and what that did for his kids, because that's his priorities. It shifted. So it's a really good interview. Puts a lot of perspective. I think one thing I took out of it as well is you can do anything from anywhere. We all had the drive to come over to California, to Silicon Valley, to the hub spot of what is known in the on the planet, right, as Sand Hill Road. And he proved it out that you can be in the middle of Ohio and do the same job. And I think COVID has something to do with that. The people's ease of closing a deal on Zoom rather than flying in and shaking a hand to close a deal. Those kind of things swished. And I think he's a proven point of, yeah, you can do this in the middle of Ohio, no problem.
Yeah, I think there's two pieces of anything is possible. There is you can do that from anywhere. That's not a problem. You can also do it with the right attitude and perspective. We talked on earlier episodes of the struggle to get coaches or volunteers or people out onto the fields. I don't have the time. I don't have the expertise. There's a lot of excuses built up. If you change that perspective to say, yes, I can, let me figure out a way. And some of the best advice I got in the early days of Facebook, um, Jeremy Lewis was, one of the direct sales guys, looked up to him and everything that he was doing. And he had a kid that was in Little League in Los Gatos. and he ended up playing high school ball at Los Gatos. He made it a point to get to absolutely every game. And for somebody coming up early in the career saying, oh, he's prioritizing the family. He's able to leave work and he gets caught up. He does a great job, but he's able to prioritize that. And he set the foundation and the entire outlook for his life centered around being there for his kids. And I've been fortunate to be at companies that helped prioritize. You know, Cheryl, what she's done at Facebook to really prioritize being there for your families. Um, the companies provide that outlet, but it's kind of like unlimited vacation as well. It's great that you have the perk, but until you do something about it, it's meaningless. And that comes down to us, our own personal drive to prioritize and take action on what those priorities are. And that could mean leaving a job. Like for me, I was driving 2 hours a day into San Francisco. It was a drag on me. It was a drag on the family. I came home and instead of wanting to be, around everybody, it was like, oh, let me have a minute. I just need to decompress. So I prioritized a job jump, into San Jose, which is a little bit closer to home, which really helped, but it still wasn't prioritizing the right things until later on in life, later on in the career.
Well, and I think we talked about this prior as well of our generation. I think if we're not the hardest workers in the room, we're not working hard. Right. So our mentality was you needed to be in the office, you need to do 12 hours a day, all this bullshit.
But let me
And
challenge just for a second. It wasn't about the actual drive. I think we have the drive. It's the perception of the drive.
yes,
I'm going to
sorry.
show up
Yes.
earlier than everybody else. I'm going to turn the lights on and turn the lights off in the office.
Yeah.
I'm burning the candle at both ends. Like all of that was the perception
Yeah.
of being a great worker. Now, it didn't matter if I could do that job in 2 hours. I'm still going to draw it out so that I have the
Yeah.
perception,
Yeah.
that's the bullshit I think you're hitting on.
Yeah. And that was the management perception as well. That if you weren't in the office, you weren't working, which is complete bullshit. Right. It's there's so many ways again of skinning the cat that as long as the job's getting done, and I think that's one thing that shifted in sales as well was nobody cared where the top reps were because they were the ones bringing in the POs, so it didn't really matter, and nobody blinked an eyelid, and it had to shift through COVID for the engineers and the other team members because you couldn't be in the office, right? So then you really saw where people's skill sets were when there wasn't somebody on their shoulder watching them, right? So I think you're totally right, dude. It's hard to juggle. It's a struggle ball, as we keep saying, right? And I think Robert really caps it well in this interview of a 10-year journey and how he's now treating his life a different way, but still having the enjoyment, right? As he says in it, he's still doing the same things. It's just in a different process now, and the prioritization side of it has shifted a little. And again, not that he was bad at any of these things, just his what he wants, it wasn't at the top of the priority, and that's when he made that shift. So it's a good interview. I think people, everybody that we know that has gone through the struggle bubble of why we start this podcast, this is an ideal of somebody we don't know, that's in another state that's made this work, but went through the same pressure and stress that is what we're seeing from our friends on the daily.
And that's the takeaway. Everybody's experiencing their own struggle bubble. We talk a lot about sports of bucket filling, making sure that the kid's bucket is filled with whatever motivates them. The same thing happens with us. The problem is we have many buckets that we want to keep filled, some at the expense of others. Robert does a great job of walking us through how to keep each one of those buckets filled and refocus that priority, but it comes with experience. So if you're listening to this on the early part of your career or the tail end of your career, I'm sure your experience is a little bit different, but the same root causes of that little bit of discomfort here and there comes down to that focus on priorities. So with that, please stay tuned. Coming up next, our interview with Robert Hatta. We're excited to welcome our first guest on Struggle Bubble, Robert Hatta, currently the founder of 10x Talent. He's got a wealth of experience working with startups and tech CEOs, helping them grow and scale their companies, turn into exceptional leaders that their companies are really looking for. And Robert reached out to us a little bit ago with his personal experience and what resonated with the Struggle Bubble. Welcome, Robert Hatta.
Thank you, Craig and Chad, for having me. I didn't know I would be the first guest. But as I was listening to your early episodes, I was like, these guys are speaking a language that's really familiar to me. And that's why I reached out to not only get caught up on what you're doing, which I think is amazing, but also to share a little bit about my journey in a lot of similar, what resonates in a lot of similar ways to what you guys have shared on this podcast, which I think again, I applaud you for giving it a name, both literally but also figuratively, saying, "Hey, this is a thing that we are experiencing, and that we think a lot of other folks like us are experiencing, and maybe we'd benefit from talking it out, even if it's just amongst ourselves." So
Well,
thank you.
we appreciate you reaching out. And I mean, you and I connected. I just looked back on the initial correspondence. I think it's been about 6 years now. I saw an article that you were featured in VentureBeat talking about the Midwest being overlooked as far as VC and tech and everything that you were doing with Drive at the time. And it resonated with me because growing up in rural Ohio, Northeast Ohio, went to Oberlin, where you're from. It is flyover country in some people's minds, but there is a ton of talent and great people there that can build companies. Walk us through a little bit about your journey, from northeastern Ohio to and get us caught up to today.
Well, like you mentioned, I grew up in a small town just west of Cleveland, and as far back as I can remember, my sole intent was to grow up and get as far away as possible, as soon as possible. And California always represented, probably similar to both of you, this sort of promised land of opportunity. And when I was looking at colleges to attend, I was fortunate enough to be a good enough athlete and a good enough student to get recruited to Stanford. And this is in the early to mid 90s. So it brought me to California. It brought me to the Bay Area specifically at a time when so many amazing things were happening in tech. Silicon Valley had gone from sort of the early stages of the semiconductor and chip industry to what was at that time the internet, and it offered so many cool ways for a young and pretty clueless person to jump in, learn really fast, get way more responsibility around a product or even a company than they deserved or earned. And I got hooked. I got hooked bad. I loved working at the pace of startups. I loved seeing the impact of my work very quickly, and I loved the other types of people that it attracted to it. Fast moving, entrepreneurial, creative folks that seemed to be everywhere, and it was really intoxicating. So I spent after Stanford the first decade of my career split between the Bay Area and later in Europe, where I was working for tech companies, Bay Area based tech companies across the full spectrum, startups of a dozen or fewer folks to Apple and Netflix, and some pretty well known tech brands. And that journey was again exciting and fun, and really exposed me to the internal workings of how these companies grow and change through scales. But ultimately, as I entered I guess my early to mid 30s, it's funny that all the reasons I was trying to get away from Ohio were the ones that called me back. Being close to family, just the value system of the Midwest, and wanting to build and grow my own family around that. So my wife and I moved back in 2007, 2008, and it's been the last 15 years or so here. But very fortunately for me, still very much involved in the tech industry, both working closely with startup founders and CEOs, but from the standpoint of a talent partner inside of a venture capital fund.
And when you look at what makes the Midwest tick and California tick, being able to see both sides, and then as you're building companies, what are some of those characteristics that you see that translate on both sides that you've seen come out in the tech scene in Silicon Valley, but also rise through the Midwest?
Yeah, well, when I first went to Silicon Valley, in the mid to late 90s, that you had to go to the Bay Area to if you wanted to build a large scale technology company. The infrastructure, the trade craft, the talent, the research, the capital were all based in Silicon Valley, literally on Sand Hill Road, like 1 square mile of real estate. And if you were far away from that epicenter, it was harder and harder for you to envision building a big company. Today, though, that's totally different. The infrastructure you used to have to build and own, you rent with a credit card. The engineers who build and scale and protect and secure that infrastructure, you rent with a credit card. A lot of cases, the software, you rent with a credit card. So there's a lot of tools and platforms that Silicon Valley built that have enabled the creation of large scale technology businesses anywhere. And that really starts to shift toward the top layer of an offering or of a product. How well do you understand your market, your customer, and your domain? Many of which are not in Silicon Valley, many of which surround us here in the Midwest: healthcare, insurance, financial services, banking, retail, supply chain, logistics, agriculture. These are vast industries that consume or are being disrupted by technology. Those enabling technologies have allowed entrepreneurs here to tackle those problems, to disrupt those industries. And I was fortunate to join Drive Capital at its beginnings a little over 10 years ago, as it started to put real capital toward the building of those companies and into those businesses.
And as you're building that business up with Drive, talk to us a little bit, and this, we're gonna get to the struggle bubble a bit, of the motivating factors for you when you just moved back. You're close to hometown, you have the family structure there, but you're trying to build a business. What was the motivating factor in those mid 20s to mid 30s as you're trying to grow this business?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I had a planned career path. I think a lot of people wish they could say that. Um, but there's so many bright and shiny objects in Silicon Valley, and so many cool ideas. And it was easy and fortunate to sort of follow the momentum. Look at the interesting startups, the technology trends, and pick a company or follow a friend or a former colleague places. Not with a ton of direction or intention. When I got home to Ohio and sort of graduated out of that sort of opportunistic sort of follow the momentum of your career 20s and 30s to really invest in not only that stage of life, family, being a young father, but also to really pick where I wanted to invest the next decade or so of my career. I started to put a little bit more thought into that, and luckily, like I said, the opportunity set was actually quite strong in tech, returning to Ohio in the Midwest, and that's what led me to shift into what I've been doing now for the last 15 years, which is helping these founders build their teams, strategize the talent side, the people side of their business, and then put in place those best practices, those systems, that infrastructure that helps them actually become a growing company, not just grow.
That's a lot about the work life and the transition from West Coast back to, as I call it, the East Coast, which will get critiqued by everyone from Ohio. But you mentioned it a couple of times now, that there was a real fundamental thought process around, hey, young family, maybe we don't want to be in the middle of Silicon Valley. Maybe we want to go back to, Ohio. And, fortunately, you've got a skill set. And as you said earlier, it's gone from you need brick and mortar and develop your own software and your own code and all that to, I'm just going to swipe a credit card. We'll just get an office, we'll get Adobe on a credit card, we'll use Git, whatever, open source comes wild. You make that transition, which is amazing that you can take that skill set now into the middle of the country. But the family part of it, right? You're now in your early to mid 30s. You've realized consciously that I really want to spend more time as a father and doing more things with their kids and raising them in a different way that's maybe different to the middle of Silicon Valley. Just kind of walk us through that. So, your decision to leave Drive Capital, and then I know there's a big year there that we can dig into that you guys took out and
Mhm.
to travel. So yeah, just kind of walk us through that if you can.
When we landed back in Ohio, and this is in the Cleveland area originally, um, it was very much a conscious decision in total alignment with my wife. We're going back to raise our family near our four living and mostly healthy parents so that they can know and love our grandchildren and vice versa. Or sorry, our children, their grandchildren, and vice versa. And that was um, the sort of last it would be another decade before I made that conscious and that aligned life decision with my wife. We came home um, with total alignment and intention, and sort of put the steps in place. You know, we finally got married. We had kids. We bought the home. We started thinking about our community. I was doing interesting work things, but they were not consuming or putting any of those other priorities at risk. When I got the opportunity to join Drive Capital and we moved a couple hours south to Columbus, a lot of that changed, and not in ways that I was actually giving enough attention at the time. We pulled our kids not to the other side of the world by any means, but a few hours away from their grandparents. Um, we changed our lives for the first time purely in pursuit of a career opportunity that I was grateful to have, and especially with the group of folks that were involved. This is a fund founded by two former Sequoia Capital investors in the state where I live, 2 hours away, that are about to launch the largest venture capital fund to ever exist between the coasts. Yeah, yeah, that was really
Pretty
exciting to
cool.
me,
Yeah.
and a really great opportunity. And I don't regret that, but it was the first time where I made a decision for me and my career that wasn't in alignment both with what was best at the time for my wife and her career, which she had to pause when we moved, and all of the other reasons we had moved back to the Cleveland area to be near our parents. So it, it sort of set in motion um, a shift away from what up to that point had been very clearly articulated priorities shared by the two of us, and a life that aligned with it. Here it was a deviation. It felt to me like, oh, a temporary one, or I can still be a great father, great husband, present in all the ways that matter. Um, but that first move and that decision led to what was a near decade of pure focus on the job. And the job ended up being pretty demanding, both in time and travel, and urgency that over the years, um, again, as we had moved back to have a life close to parents, close to family, close to each other, it's what we all want. Um, I took a almost 10-year, I wouldn't say deviation, but enough off the track and in pursuit of my own ambition, that over the years sort of it drifted further and further away from the things that were important to me and the things that I cared about.
Yeah, and I presume that makes the pause, right? That gives you the pause of, okay, and just as you're talking, it relates to myself and Chad as well. I'm sure that we've come from somewhere, we've transitioned to somewhere else with the goal of, I don't want to say climbing the ladder, but we've got these sets of goals we want to achieve. And then 10 years in or so, we hit this very hard pause of like, okay, now I actually want to go back to where I started because that makes way more sense to me than keep trying to jump this ladder system that's, and you've been here, so you know, and people that haven't, it affects a lot of people's health, a lot of people's mental health, a lot of people's families get disjointed. There's multiple things that can go wrong by trying to chase that ladder system. And sometimes it works out great, don't get me wrong. But, and again, it's the drive for me. It's the drive to Silicon Valley. It was you can do anything. And that's still true, by the way. Like, don't
Mm-hmm.
take that away. Like, you literally can walk into a Starbucks, pitch an idea to somebody that you made the next $1 billion company. It's just the way it is here. But it's really interesting that you consciously, or maybe subconsciously, had that pause moment after that decade and realize, oh shit,
Well,
we got to
pause moment
change.
after 10 years is not, you know, I was consumed and enjoying myself, and seeing the positive outputs of that effort for sure.
Yeah,
Um, and it wasn't like I was a deadbeat father or husband,
yeah,
but if you asked me before, what are my priorities? It would be relationships, my wife, my kids, my family, my friends, my health, and then my career. And if you asked me today, you'd get the same answer. But in the middle, during those 10 years, how I spent my time was flip flopped. It
yeah.
was career taking the lion's share, and being an okay dad, an okay husband, an okay friend, and definitely not being okay at health. The schedule did not allow for um, a lot of exercise over that decade, which and all the things that long term matter for a lot of reasons, but especially as you start to get into your 40s, um, that was way down the priority, high on the priority list, way on the life spending time on it list.
It's a cultural thing a little bit too, or the Valley definitely, but I think in the United States in general, that grind culture, the glorifying that grind, and if you're not suffering, you're not succeeding. That's what we grew up with.
And ambition's very narrowly defined toward career, toward income, toward wealth. Where there's a lot. I've since learned there's a lot of ways to approach and be ambitious about things that matter to you. Ambitious about being a great dad. Ambitious about being a great coach if you're involved in youth sports or sports. Ambitious about being a present partner for your spouse. Those are ambitions that often get devalued in American culture, and especially if you grew up in, not so economically strong circumstances like I did, where you feel like it's not just about, work hard, keep your head down, make sacrifices, have ambition, career ambition, make money, and then get to do the things you want to do in life. Um, you have that added fear of, if I'm not moving relentlessly toward those things, I'm actually sinking and falling backward, and can fall all the way backward, as we see all the time. You see in the Bay Area, certainly on the streets of San Francisco, but also just growing up in a rural area of Ohio, you see a lot of folks that are on that line, and then they slip and they keep falling down, and that is an added motivator, not always the healthy ways of that drive.
Oh, the anxiety that comes around that as well is unbelievable. It's not healthy.
Was there I mean, we mentioned that it was a 10-year bubble for you as you go through and you get in that flow focus of what's important to you. You're waking up, you're grinding, you're feeling that is who you are. So you continue to do that. And then you,
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, the tethers to the other things that you did want to be great at the beginning become harder to do. There's only so many hours in the day. And if you're going to grind throughout, it's tough to prioritize, as you mentioned, your health, exercising, little league games for some people, going to dance recitals, right? It's just, hey, I gotta work. I gotta work. And Craig and I hear it all the time where there's excuses being made of, I can't. I need to get this deck built. I need to
Mm-hmm.
go to Vancouver on this work trip. I need to go I need to go to Europe to close these deals. And then the years start to slip away. I'm curious, as you go over that 10-year span, are there little nuggets in time or advice or feedback that you were getting that started to then build up to lead you to the decisions that you made over the past couple of years?
Yeah. The the first signs of the wake up started in COVID. Like so many other people, COVID changed the way I think about a lot of things. But here I was, no less consumed or focused on the job, but all of a sudden I'm home all the time on Zoom calls with the noise canceling headphones, knowing that in the same house, not more than a few feet away from me, the family and the struggle with the schoolwork and the online stuff and just all of that's going on. And I'm here and I'm in the house, but I'm not here and I'm not accessible. And from whatever it was, 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock, I'm in the guest room on the computer and the guest room has its own bathroom, so I'm not even leaving that little space, and just knowing how much was going on under the same roof at the same time, not all of it great, and I'm useless, and I'm there but not at all present. That was kind of the wake up, and it was made worse by the fact that I took on another project that had me on Zoom calls from like 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. So I'd pop down and have dinner and then back up in the room. And that was the way it was for like 9, 10 months. So that I think that was like, whoa, this is, where I thought I was, being ambitious and focused and prioritizing career, but not quite sucking at the other things. Where I was like, no, you do suck at those things because they're right here happening and you're not able to help at all.
And if you're listening to this and not watching video, we're all nodding and resonate. Like the story, we try to ignore those 3 years of being, locked inside, but similar, situation. We had a guest room that was converted into an office so that I could be present in those meetings. And our twins are going through Zoom kindergarten. And, Lauren, my wife, is struggling to just get them to stay seated because it's a foreign thing for them to do. It feels traumatizing to think back on it. But I could feel that guilt, but also didn't feel like I had the tools to say anything at work because that would be perceived as me not giving 110%. And, oh, you're not being a team player. Everybody's doing this. Go in there. At the same time, I've got, I think resentment, I think Lauren would say that, building up from a spouse and even from the kids. Our youngest would come in and use that bathroom that's off the guest room because that was the chance he got to see me. And I had some great videos of him doing pull-ups in the background, and I didn't even know it while I'm presenting to 300 people. But that's what started to chip away for me, is that I just couldn't deal with that guilt every single day of I'm in the house. Dad, I can see you. Why aren't you here with me? And it starts to just build up more and more. And that was for me, that putting the perspectives in line. It sounds like similar for you of, hey, a realization that I could do better.
And as it's happening, you don't really necessarily have a name for it. You just feel uneasy. You feel out of alignment. You feel like something's not right, and I'm anxious. And that's sort of how it manifested with me. It was just feeling anxious, feeling out of sorts as we started to move back into the office and back into the schools and back into the world throughout 2021. I think that's when, as that year progressed, I got back into contact with a coach. I started working with a coach. Again, I've worked with coaches on and off over the span of my career, but with this time was like an intended, like, it wasn't just, hey, I want to get better at, career, or I want to get better at public speaking. This was one of those where I went back and I'm like, something doesn't feel right in me. And I want to work with, I re-engaged a coach that I worked with in the past, who's, a friend, a mentor, and a really sharp person at pulling out what's going on with the right kind of questions. And it was through that effort over sort of the middle of 2021 and going into the late that year where I started to crack open. It wasn't just this uneasy feeling. I could start to identify and understand just why I was feeling out of sorts and how I got here, to the point where I started waking up. Like these last, call it 9 years, I've been completely misallocating my energy and time relative to the things I cared about most. And that's kind of, it's not like career ambition or drive are bad things. They're great. And for a lot of people, like there are periods of time where that's the number one thing. And you should allocate your time and your energy toward it. But for me, it was a misallocation vis-a-vis the priorities that I still held and cared about. And when you have what you're spending your time on versus what you care about coming out of alignment, your body, your mind starts to tell you, if not, your spouse or your kids or the other extrinsic voices.
So we go through there, the bubble pops a bit, and you want to take action. What do you start to do?
Yeah, and when I say it cracked open, and for me it cracked open, it's like first was I'd been working with the coach, and then I facilitated an offsite for the CEOs in our portfolio that had Jerry Colonna and a bunch of the reboot coaches there, and Jerry Colonna does what Jerry Colonna does, which is ask the kind of questions meant to crack you open, call out where you are, cut through the bullshit. How'd you get here, and where do you really want to be? And it was through that experience over a couple days, on top of the foundation I was already starting to reestablish with my coach, that said, I'm out of sorts. It feels like I'm in control of nothing, which means it feels like I suck at everything. And the first thing I could think of to sort of get back to and start working on investing in and fixing was my marriage. And it wasn't in crisis by any means, but it was absolutely not given the priority over those prior years that it deserved, and that aligns with my, what I care about. So the first thing I did, as I realized, shit, I'm not where I want to be. I'm not spending the time where I want to spend it. It's out of alignment with my priorities. Let's pick out one of those things and get it to where it needs to be. And thankfully that was my partnership with my wife. She was ready. She was there. We had drifted, and sort of like you do in so many ways at this stage of our lives, you kind of figure your lanes. She's going to do the transportation and the bill paying. I'm going to do, meal prep and coach the kids or work. You kind of settle into these roles, and we had done that. They hadn't completely drifted to sort of opposing sides, but we weren't right next to each other in the way we needed to be. So this return to invest in our partnership, getting marriage counseling, getting back right with her, unpacking all of the stuff that kind of gotten us to where we were in this sort of separate but parallel life, was saved everything for me, and really righted me, so that the other things were sort of fairly easy to tackle and figure out.
Yeah, I kind of talk about that. It's kind of like a flow state. You don't realize you need to take a pause and get back into that flow. But when you do it, then you start finding that other things fall into the flow as well. You didn't know you were missing certain things, but the minute you fix that first one, it's like running the marathon, right? You take the first step, then the second step, then the third. And that flow state generally kicks back in. And it's amazing what the brain and the body will trigger when you get back into those states when you've been out of them. It's pretty impressive how smart the body and the brain
are.
And
it's really an elimination of noise and chaos, and really fixing on a signal. And for me, that was my wife, our marriage, our partnership, our friendship. And once that was identified, that's the stable ground. And I planted my feet on that foundation. Sort of the chaos, the anxiety of all these other things sort of come into clearer focus. And it's like, that's no big deal. Wipe it off the board. That's important. Why don't I spend some more time on that? This thing we've been thinking about and talking about for a while, but ignoring. Let's put that into the focus area. So that ultimately led to the decision to leave my job, and then pursue this round the world trip / homeschooling experience for our family that we had been talking about and sort of shelved for years. That grounding, realignment with my wife, opened the door to something we'd sort of forgotten, and put back in its place.
Yeah, well, you've got the whole Medium series. You did a really great job of blogging from start to finish. So we'll add that link into the podcast, etc. So people can go in and take a look and a read. And if people are, I'd love to do it. Get me out for a year. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, really captivating way of doing things with your kids and your family, and something they're going to live by for the rest of their life, right? It's something they're going to take all the way. So kind of transitioning a little bit, what's the future hold? What does that look like today for Robert?
Yeah. I mean, we take it, one chapter at a time. And for us, the next chapter is the limited number of years we have while our kids are at home. Our daughter's a sophomore in high school. Our son's going into the 7th grade. So we got like 6 years. And because that's the priority, being present, being involved, everything else sort of is shaped in the wake of that priority. So we moved back to Columbus after our year abroad. It's a community our kids love. It's a community we love. The economic opportunities for me are still abundant as they were before. So there was no major change there. But for me, the bigger changes were, I love what I do. I love what I've been doing. I'm good at it. There's still a need for it out there. But I want to do it on terms that I can control. Who do I work with? What feedback, findings, advice can I give them? All of which, through various stages of my career have required or involved filters that I no longer need or want. And independence gives me that freedom, but also, I don't have to travel a ton. We can work, and I can support clients all over the country as I do through Zoom and through virtual engagement. So being home, being around, having a flexible schedule, working with who I want, the way I want. These are the kind of things that are different for this next stage. And after that, who knows? Once the kids are up and doing what they're doing out in the world, hopefully, my wife and I'll take a look at where we want to go and what we want to do at that point.
Yeah, I love how you take the stance of prioritization and then re-looking at that prioritization of depending on the time and the kids, the family, etc. But just keeping that as a moving model, right? Priorities right now is this, and then we'll see where it takes us in the next year, two, whatever. If they flip, they flip. That's okay. And I think the communication, by the sounds of it, that you now have, is completely open. Like, okay, the career's in there, but where does it sit, right? And give me your opinion.
Yeah, and it's it's intentional. You got to write it down. If you don't write it down, it isn't real. And I went through an exercise with my coaches. Basically, here are the things I care about. This is me. These are my values. These are my priorities, as defined and supported over the years by the choices I've made, and what are the actions and decisions and choices that support that model of who I am. Then the next stage is, all right, how does a decision match up and align with that model? So it's, this isn't, by default or by accident. It's very intentional. And whereas before, I probably would have written out the same model of who I am, what I cared about. But then if you looked at the life I was leading, the decisions I was making, it didn't match up. And in this stage, it does. And it doesn't mean I don't care about being excellence in my career. I don't care about money. I don't care about ambition, but the ambition is being distributed across other priorities as well.
So I'm going to bring us home with one more question or theme, Robert. As you've gone through your personal journey, you're back in the Midwest. You're raising your kids in the Midwest. You have kids high school age, junior high age. What advice are you giving them as they start thinking about next chapters in their life as they look at colleges based on your experiences?
It's funny. The only college conversations we have with our kids are intentionally around college as an option. or if you are going to go to college, it needn't be right at the year you graduate. I want our kids to understand themselves, understand the world, understand themselves in the world, and start to make conscious decisions around where they want to take that. And some of that might lead to college, it might lead to international travel, it might lead to the trades, it might lead to culinary arts. Who knows? But we're really intentional about saying, like, figure out what you want, and figuring out what you want takes time. This, longer for others, some than for others. And I think, again, our struggle bubble is at this stage of life is really just another chapter of a struggle bubble that started when you were a teenager, where the world expects you to do this: go to college. What are you going to study? I don't know. What kind of job are you going to get? I guess the jobs these guys are getting, because that's what everybody's doing. All the sort of momentum and inertial driven, seriously important life decisions made out of reaction or extrinsic influence without any real choice. That I don't want that for our kids. I want them to take lessons and sort of figure things out and make mistakes. And college is just one of several applications of that self exploration, I guess.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think we talk about that a lot, and you hit on every single subject that we chat about. That was, we were going through the schooling system. There was expectations. There was certain things you had to tick the box, and if you didn't, you didn't move forwards. And I think now those things, our generation and our kids are not going to experience the same way that we did, because not every you can't put a round hole square peg scenario.
Yeah. And to acknowledge, I mean, they're lucky. Like, they will have these choices.
Yeah.
And that can't be said for a lot of folks in our country and around the world. So I definitely remind them of that. I want you to take your time. I want you to understand yourself. I want you to make intentional choices, but also understand, like, the world you were born into allows you that privilege. So, and be grateful for that. And part of the travel experience for us was to see other parts of the world where that is not the case, and to appreciate the world they were born into.
Yeah.
Robert, this has been a fantastic conversation. Appreciate you reaching out to us in the first place and walking us through your journey from Ohio to the West Coast and back again. A lot of head nodding from all of us, and I'm sure our listeners are going to love the commentary that you've had. With that, we're going to close out this 7th episode of The Struggle Bubble. As always, please follow us on Instagram, The Struggle Bubble Pod. Any questions or commentary, get in there. Craig and I answer. Robert, I'm sure, will join in if you have any questions. And like and subscribe everywhere that you're listening. We're on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify right now. With that, until next week, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, guys.